The game of life is to be your very best.
Most people think pretending to be rich is only an illusion. They may live in a big house, they have a lot of cars and all that, but if you really look into them, they don't own it. The banks own it. So they're really not rich. They only have the illusion of being rich. So it comes back to thinking. You have to look at things. You have to think, and you got to investigate. Like in business, you have to investigate whether something is viable or not. The facts. You don't just go and listen to people. Oh, this is a good idea. This is a good business and all that, and you just go ahead into it without checking. And if you haven't developed your mind to think, you will lose all your money because you're investing something that is not viable. Which comes back to one other thing topic that I love talking about is great ideas are not necessarily viable. In fact, a lot of great ideas, the idea is good, brilliant. It does not mean it's viable because viability is there. Do you have cash customers? No matter how good this code is, if no one wants to buy it, it's not viable. See, so it may be a great idea to have this style and this color and all that, but it's not necessarily viable. So it helps the mind if you set out in business or when you're doing income generating projects to assume that the project is not viable. It's a great idea, but it's not viable until you go out and prove it that it is viable. It's like being in court. All accused people in court you must assume they're innocent until someone proves conclusively they are guilty. Even a known criminal is innocent until you prove that he actually committed a crime. In business it's the same. People are not viable because they're educated, they got degrees, doesn't make them viable. They have to prove that they are viable. And this is what I have designed. I've designed an education system to develop viable people. So it comes back to, and the first part of the education is to develop the mind. Before you think, because most people end up doing something else than what they were taught at school. There's so many people I've met in my life, they got a degree in engineering and they end up teaching. Or they got a degree being a doctor, the doctor end up being a carpenter. Got nothing to do with what they've learned at school, because the reason is that person, that's not his passion, it's not his talent to be a lawyer or doctor. His talent may be in singing, in something else. So we end up doing what we love doing. Some people don't. They end up dying in the work which they hate every day, and that's why productivity suffer. Because if you only work because you have to work, you will never become the best. Only when people do what they want to do, that's when they excel. And it's not just in business, it's in sport, it's in music, it's in everything. When you want to do something, it's no longer work. It's an enjoyment. It's a passion, and that's what brings up the creativity in this neck-top computer. And the best way to access this gold mine, I call it gold mine, because it's full of ideas. A lot of it great ideas, but then you have to develop it to make sure it is viable. So all the creativity, all the ideas come from the mind. And there are more gold in each person's mind than there are underground in the whole world.
I think with us, we haven't been taught in a way where we're supposed to go into what we're passionate about.
Yeah.
And also like the feeling of failure and feeling of giving up, it comes so soon to us when we want to start something.
That's right.
So like how do I go about it when I have that sort of feeling that comes to me that I mustn't give up, I have to keep on going on?
If you start an income generating project with the assumption that it is viable, you will surely meet failure. And the wrong, what was wrong is in your mind. You assume this is viable when it is never viable. You haven't proven it's viable. But if you assume that this project is viable, and then you go on trial and you prove that it is really not viable, you call it failure. I don't, because it was never viable in the first place. You're there to prove that it's viable. And if you are unable to prove it's viable, you have to move on to another project, another great idea. And you keep on going until you find one great idea that is viable.
Best of